see a point to distinguishing.
Probably a niche thing too, like depends on the field. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, let me just go through what's here. Okay, so my question was about when you asked how different forms of knowledge representation may or may not fit Rand's theory of concepts.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing, I wrote down, I'm not seeing them as commensurable things, meaning like if I group art in my house by feelings evoked, that's a form of classification. But I'm trying to apply the concept for the whole idea of concept formation. But how does that fit or not fit into Rand's theory of concept formation? Like they're completely, if I classify art by feelings evoked, like why would I compare that to concept formation?
Well, let's see what exactly I mean by, let me open the document, see what I was trying to ask.
Sure.
Let's see. Wozniak.
Kvasnik, is that what she's called?
Yeah. Oh, I was referring to like trees or hierarchies.
Okay.
Things like that.
All right. So basically, I guess I could say, what are the similarities and what are the differences? That would be a way for me to. Okay.
Yeah, it's just like consider those things.
Yeah. Okay. We spoke about free will. So I was thinking about free will as far as its ability to determine our lives. I don't even know if that's a good word to use, but not directly. Like, for example, I can't focus on changing something now, but I can focus on implementing change over a long period of time. So I can describe free will. In some way, free will is causal, but it has a particular, like the way you describe the function of free will is it's causal, like it can, should we say influence, or I don't know if we should say determine or influence, we could say influence your life, but it has a certain nature. And so it can't influence it immediately, or it can't change it immediately. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, I think that usually it's a matter of focusing your thinking to direct your action. It's selection. It's choice selecting among alternatives. It's usually long range. It usually would just orient you towards your behavior in a certain way. I'm thinking about, say, you can say you've decided to get up and go eat dinner or something. You can say you've decided to do that in the sense that you've said, I'm going to stand up, mean something like that. But you don't need to have the free will to say, be thinking about how to move your feet, exactly how to open the door or to open the refrigerator door. You don't need free will really to do that. You've learned how to open the door, but it's not like you're deciding each muscle you move. So in that sense, you're choosing like setting off a chain of events and things like that.
Right. Okay. But I guess part of the reason I was thinking about this, I was writing about it and I was trying to work out like, well, how much, I asked the question, how much of my life does free will impact or determine? But I guess to answer that, you'd need to know what are the things that impact a life that are within that. What are the things, what is the universe or the set of things that impact a person's life? And then what is the set of things that a person controls? I had no way to explain it cleanly. That was why I wrote it down and asked the question, because on the one hand, free will is causal, but on the other, it's not. Like I can't use free will to just identify some new law of physics. Maybe if I dedicate my life to it and exercise free will, it will. So it's it has what I'm trying to do is capture what is the nature of its power, which I can't put in words eloquently.
I see what you mean. Like you don't just will that recognition out of nowhere. Like I'd say discover new law of physics. It's not just that you think it, like think,
Yeah.
I'm going to do that and it appears.
Yeah.
I guess it's usually we can think about it in different ways. Like one can think about how we move. Say you're walking to your car,
Yeah.
something like that. I mean, you could say it's free will is the recognition that there's a need to go somewhere, or a recognition about to consider reality such that you have to make a choice, that something came to your front of your mind to think about. Do I go to work? Do I not? Do I get in the car? Do I not? We can think about it that way. And I mean, you need that free will. You could say it's causal in the sense that it brings you to act a certain way. It causes your body to move. It somehow leads you to move, usually by selecting among alternatives.
Right. Yeah, okay. All right. I think there are some things, I was thinking about this, but there are some things in philosophy, like I have questions and I was thinking about, and I'm curious if you've thought about this and what your thoughts are, but I was thinking about, there are some questions I have, and what if, it's not that there's no answer, but what if to get an answer would take a life dedicated to finding that answer? And then you don't want to, I don't know if you necessarily want to dedicate your life, you want to live too. So, but you might have like a question like, how do you organize and integrate a value hierarchy and then consciously and explicitly hold it? That could take, who knows how long that might take. I don't have an answer to that. Yeah, but so that's an example. Like, do you want to spend, there are some things that to you are important questions, but do you want to potentially spend a whole life answering them? And this free will may be another one of them. Like how much, I don't even know if that's a good question, but yeah, how much, what is the nature of free will as far as its ability to determine our fate?
I think I'm confused what you mean to determine our fate. Do you mean in what way it enabled us to act?
I guess it's a desire to see how powerful it is, like how much of a life can it actually affect. But okay. I probably need to think about it more. But
so you're asking about in what way can it impact your life? In the way, say we can't always impact, say we could impact where we were born, of course, but we can't.
Yeah, there are like things we can't impact, and there are things we can impact.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know. But my question was, if you have questions for yourself, and you know getting an answer is difficult, how do you think about them? Like, what do you just say? I don't know. I don't have an answer, so I'm going to just act on my emotion, or like a value hierarchy. Let's say there are 5 things. Let's say you've got you don't have an explicitly held value hierarchy, but it's important, but you don't know how long it would take you to organize and figure that out. It could take a lifetime to, not to say a value hierarchy is a static thing, but have an answer to how to introspect properly and organize your hierarchy from week to week. Doing that, let's say, would take you could take a lifetime. But in the meantime, how do you think about, all right, well, I've got 5 things I'm interested in. I should just do what I feel like. Then you're acting on emotion. Not that that's a terrible thing, but if you want to concern yourself with purpose and, like a consciously held philosophy, then that would be cool to optimize that way. But that's just an example of like, do you have questions that for you are important, but you feel like answering them would take a lifetime? And then how do you, in the interim, what's your posture towards them? Like, do you just say, well, I don't know, and so I'll just
I
go by my
mean,
feeling?
that's when I go by, like, say, best estimate or the continuum of proof. We could say you have anything from certainty to anything completely below that, because the
Right.
uncertainty, probable, maybe, almost certain, pretty sure, things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what you would have to do, I think. You have to rank things in terms of, say, what sense you have evidence for them. I mean, if you don't have much evidence for something, a little bit, but not much, you don't really want to act on it. You don't want to always act on, say, your suspicions of arresting a criminal just because you have a few facts.
Right.
You don't want to, but if you're pretty sure, sometimes it's worth taking a risk about your uncertainty or all things you have to act soon. So you just make the best estimate you can,
Yeah.
given what you know, and just
Yeah.
recognize you have a limit on what you know. And that sense apply to things you have almost no time to figure out. You could even say, like, well, would it take a lifetime? Then you do need to use what you know now.
Yeah.
Just do your best.
Do you have questions like that in philosophy? Not that specific value hierarchy one, but that are important to you. And then do you think of them that way? Well, I don't, over time I study it, but then, and think about it, but I may not get an answer. Yeah.
I think I do that naturally. Like, there's a lot I get to say about free will, but I mean, there's a lot I could say I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot I would say I'm pretty sure about it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure about having it. On some things I'm sure about how it operates. There's some pretty sensible ideas, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't say, it's not my main topic. So
Yeah.
I don't say like it's going to be my life's work. It's not,
Yeah.
it's just part of it. Just,
Right.
but I only need to do so much.
Right.
And I still get a lot done from what I've figured out so far. It's better than I was before. Say, compared to like 10 years ago, I'm better off than I was.
Right. Speaks to what you mentioned about the knowledge continuum.
Yeah.
So I was reading a book on learning, and they talked about focus and diffuse thinking, if you're familiar with that.
I never heard the term diffuse in this context. I can infer what it means, though. I think I know, just in the context.
So see if I can find it. It was strange because it was by Barbara Oakley, and she did that course on Coursera, learning how to learn anything. And it says, I'll copy paste a definition. Here. There we go.
Who's that word? I'm still. Mechanized state of mind.
These are my notes. So the ones above are my note. That's not the definition.
Yeah.
But
I was looking at Wikipedia.
They were, we can skip this also. I thought maybe, because I thought you might know. I wasn't sure.
Read it. Yeah, I would use a different term, but yeah, I know what this is. I know what they're talking about now.
But I remember you mentioned this to me as well about inspiration. And I was like, well, you can use it as an excuse, like if you just got to go for a walk or whatever, because your brain needs to do some diffusion. But when I was reading this book, what stood out to me is that they're saying that you need both, but I've always found that it's just it's just an excuse. I'm like, oh, okay, my brain, I could just go, oh, my brain just needs to do some free association. Like, no, I could just think about other random stuff that's completely unrelated. And so to me, the way I interpreted what was said in this book I read on learning anything was that focusing is just literally the difference between focusing and non-focusing. And they're then claiming that non-focusing has some important part in focusing, which doesn't make sense. Or maybe they're saying non-focusing has some important part in coming to a conclusion about something. But what confused me is they also said this thing they call diffuse thinking is big picture. But to me, focusing would be big picture if you have the right abstractions.
What I would say is they're trying to refer to valid things that I think are valid, but I think they use poor terminology based on what you're saying here.
Okay.
Like they need a conceptual cleanup, so to speak, that their concepts aren't precise enough.
Right. Right.
I think there is some value to be had in the looser thinking, but I don't want to say contrast it with focus. I don't think it has to mean that you're not focused. I don't think it needs to be thought of that way. There can be focus as in narrow thinking, like I've expressed it to you once. I have very narrow thinking.
Right.
Could be focused in their sense here. Like you're focusing on a point in space. Like, doesn't mean focus like we mean it. Like being in a state of readiness, a preparedness of thinking. Right. I think focus here is narrowness. Like you focus your eyes on a point, on a particular word. Diffuse being wide thinking or broad thinking, like I phrased it. It's not that you're unfocused. It's that you put your state in a type of focus. There's a broad focus and narrow focus. And that's the way I distinguish it. And if you're not focused in a broad sense when you go outside, take a walk, you're just, you're making an excuse. Your mind needs to be prepared for it to be matter at all.
Would you say that the broadest level of focus you can have is to identify what the purpose is? And then defining, like, let's say your purpose is solve this problem. Then that the next level of the level below it of broad. So the broadest thing is the purpose, and the level below is the definition of if you solve a problem, it's the definition of the purpose. So it's like, what is the problem? And then make sure you understand all the conceptual components of the problem. Those are the broadest. Would you agree that would be the broadest abstract perspective you could take?
I don't know about the most broad, but yeah, that's what I would mean by broad thinking. I mean, I'm thinking of, say, like thinking about the entire system of something. So if you're thinking about the goals are pretty broad in an entire system of actions, say like a whole lot of actions.
Right.
Or say if you're thinking of a system, like how does the ecosystem work? Like if you're looking at where some wolves are living, you don't look just at, say, the wolves themselves, but what do they eat? Where do they live? What's the weather like? How are the humans settling there? How does everything affect one another? That would be big picture, looking at the entire context rather than a specific element of it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, okay.
I think that would be a fair way of thinking. And that does show up in the scientific research, that you can have a broad way of thinking and a narrow way of thinking, and you can alternate between the two. And that would be a fair way to characterize it, I think.
What are your thoughts on this when they talk about diffuse thinking? And like, it does seem that they actually gave an image of a brain that had like if you can imagine a big checkerboard overlaid on this brain, and then a 2D checkerboard overlaid on the brain, and then the focus thinking was graphically displayed as very sort of tight connections between some kind of jumping line between a very tight and linear range of the board. And then diffuse was just jumping all over the place, like from right to left here. There's no order. And so they're saying that it plays some role, but I haven't experienced, I don't know if I've never experienced some magic association, or like I just go for a walk and then I have some big insight or something. I haven't. And at least when I've tried learning something, Like if I remember when I tried learning maths or something like that. I, it's not like I could just get up and, oh, that's the solution. It was like, that never worked. So what do you think they're getting at? Like, I'm not saying they're wrong. What are they getting at then when they're saying that this associational part is so important, this diffuse element?
That's hard to say, because a lot of that is, you need your mind in the right state to even do that. Like, you do need to have your concepts organized enough in that area of thinking that it can occur. I think part of that might be how long you've been working on this area or question, say,
Right.
or how long your concepts have been well organized. I don't know if it can even occur if your thinking isn't organized already
Right.
on some field. I don't think it can just happen. You just go out signing up with some insight in a field you never thought much about. That's not going to happen. I think a lot of it depends on how do you prepare your mind beforehand to get those insights to occur. Because I don't think it's just literally like your thoughts are jumping.
Me
I
neither.
think there's something you could analyze underneath the cover to say what's going on. Why did particular concepts jump up rather than others? Like, why do you even have associations? I mean, why does it seeing a certain tree make you think of a certain animal, for example? It's not just random. There's some relationship between your observations and what you think. So it's not about just randomness, but a prepared mind, I would say. That you have to organize your concepts, orient your focus on particular goals. Sometimes you let your things just go, like let things consolidate in your mind. Just let it happen. Like, focus on something else directly or something else in your periphery and just go that way. That usually can be pretty beneficial. But those insight feelings aren't. Maybe you don't experience it strongly, but I think everybody can to some degree and does. But to get those amazing ones might only happen like once in your life. Like, those most amazing ones are like once in a lifetime discoveries by that no other human ever made.
Right.
Like Newton discovering the concept gravity. It's like nobody can really describe that feeling except Newton. There's not that many concepts that people discovered that were so big in an entire field.
Right. And it's probably so fundamental that.
Yeah.
And it maybe takes a lifetime of thought in that field.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a question about models. So like in academia or because I've heard that term used in many different ways. Like I hear people say, what are your models for thinking? What are the models you use to live? So I think, in some cases people mean principles. In some cases they mean methods. In some cases they mean, I don't know, even rules. But if we're talking about, I actually looked up the definition too, but then I had these questions like, do you think models are a kind of representation of something? That's
Yes.
what it is. Yeah.
That much at least.
And
It's
then
a representation.
And then a classification is a representation of knowledge.
I mean, a model could be like a schema.
What's a schema?
Like, it's like what is your model for thinking about life? That could be a schema. What's your way of thinking about things? What did you build yourself that you follow and believe?
So your philosophy, basically.
Yeah, but that's model would be another way to say that. But
yeah,
I like the word philosophy, of course, because of Rand and all that. But that's what people mean usually. It's usually more techie people, I think, like that kind of wording.
Yeah, the map is not the. I've often heard the map is not the terrain. So like they're talking about an abstraction sometimes as well, a concept and abstraction. But the actual. So I mean, those are all just terms that we already know. But then when model is actually used, so it would be a kind of representation of a phenomena, a thing that does not represent, captures few essential variables or factors that are causally relevant.
In a more precise way, less metaphorical way is that it's an estimate of what you think reality is in order to recreate some aspect of reality. Like you're recreating reality, like your model of, say, a model of consciousness.
Right.
It's like building an AI that best estimates how humans work, or making a model about, say, the weather. You're not saying this is reality, but based on what you know about reality, this is a model you've created, and this is my understanding of everything. Like you put it into, like you build a model, like building a, I think of actually building an actual model, like a model airplane.
Yep.
It's not literally the airplane. There's aspects of it are missing,
Right.
but it's supposed to be a best estimate of an actual airplane. So you say it's a model of an airplane. And the same way a model is like, a computer model is like, how do you best imitate something in reality? How do you best imitate how people think? For example.
So something like a model would be a kind of oversimplified representation of something. You could say, you could use something as a placeholder in the definition of something for the purposes of creating a best estimate of its behavior, something like that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the best estimate usually.
Got
And then
it.
people get metaphorical, of course, but that's really what it means. You're making a best estimate of reality given what you know.
Would you say what a concept is to a concrete and a classification is to knowledge, a model is to an organism's behavior or material phenomena?
Say that again.
I've got it. I wrote it down here. I wrote it down.
Oh,
I was
there
just
it
trying to
is.
get, yeah.
Context to a concrete classification.
So it's not exactly the same, obviously, because a concept is supposed to represent concretes, and it does map. The map is the, well, I don't actually know if that's true. The map is the
I
territory,
think,
but
yeah, it makes sense.
yeah.
I
Okay.
think that sounds right. A model is usually like, you model their behavior.
Yeah.
You can say you make a wind-up rat or something, and you could say it models a rat's movements to some extent.
So it's similar to a process of abstraction in that we forget some differences. Well,
Yes.
actually, it's not actually. It's people would define once thought concepts were forgetting differences, but if we go with Rand's theory, it would be omitting them.
Yes.
And no, retaining them but omitting their measurements. But in the model's case, you actually forget the differences.
I would say so. I mean, there could be a lot of technical ways of getting into this, but I think in general, yes, that's what's implied.
Yeah.
That you left it out.
Yeah.
It's missing.
Yeah.
And you can't even retain it in some way. It's just gone. It's not necessarily wrong to do that, but in concepts, it's wrong to do that. But if you're making a model, it's not wrong. Because I mean, you can't literally make that airplane again.
Right.
To take something away and leave it out.
Right.
Same with the model of behavior.
Okay. So it's closer to models are more similar to old versions of concept formation, which is just forgetting differences.
Yes, that's a fair way to think about it, I think.
Okay, so purpose. A purpose is a kind of, like, to have a purpose is a value, right?
Yeah.
But value is also a kind of purpose, isn't? Or like, if you want a value, that's a kind of purpose.
Reason, productivity, self-esteem, purpose is a.
And so isn't that, I've got confused because it seems circular. So a purpose is a kind of value, reason, purpose, self-esteem. Well, purpose is a value. And then, but the value, like reason is you make reason your purpose, and you make self-esteem your purpose in a sense. So, or like if I want a car, then that's my purpose, and it's also my value at the same time. The
I mean,
car is
I'm
my
not
purpose.
sure how to say it differently than I have in the past, other than they're all aspects of the same thing. You just make certain narrower distinctions sometimes when you're talking about them, because like purpose is a thing you seek to have, I think sometimes, but I think it's just they're all aspects of the same thing, like of the process of living. I mean, there are things that you use and have to live, and there's the method of using them, I guess you could say.
Right.
To your virtues or your way of using your values.
Right.
I think they're all connected. You only make a conceptual distinction, but they're all parts of the same thing.
Okay.
And I'm not sure about explaining any better than that. I think we need to go into deeper reading to get better answers in that.
Right. Okay, let's see what else is here. Oh, so this is just a fun random thing. If I asked you, are people more the same than different? What's your answer? Or are they more different than the same?
People are. What is my answer? People are.
Yeah.
I almost feel like there isn't more one or the other. I think people think they are more different than they actually are. I think that's true, but I don't think people are more different than the same. Like neither, but people believe they're more different than they are generally.
Right. I was thinking about this, and this is like very nitpicky, but I was thinking about it because I used to say people are more same than different. Then I said people are more different than the same. But then I thought, when you use the word more, the concept more, you're making a you're using some kind of standard of measurement.
Yep.
But in this case, there's differences and there's similarities. Can you use similarity as a standard of measurement for difference?
Yeah.
Because that's almost like what the question is doing, right? When you put it that way, it sounds good, but is it actually valid to compare? Like, unless you mean frequency as the standard, like, you know, like amount of tiny things that are different, like, oh, this person has fingernails that are 1 centimeter longer. Like, then there's no, would I be right to say that people I don't even know how you'd answer that, but because I've heard this before, I don't think it's valid now that I thought about it.
My answer why it's not valid of a question, well, first off, they're the same thing. They're the same category of thing, same class of thing. Like we're talking about human individual.
Yeah.
They all vary in the same way. They all are similar in the same ways. They vary on the same measurements. They're the same on the same measurements. We're all the same measurement in terms of we are rational animals. There's a certain expected amount of fingers we should have, the organs we should have. I mean, we all have 2 lungs in that sense. They can vary just as much as another person. We're not talking about a particular person. We're talking about people in general.
Right.
I'm not saying that, oh, that John is more different than Lewis or something. With that, maybe you could. But 2 people, they're the same category, like person 1, person 2. They're just as different, just as the same, because they're the same thing. The emitted measurements are the things we vary on. Say you might vary on sometimes number of fingers, but still 99% people still have 10 fingers.
Right.
And we're still all have 2 hearts, or each person has 1 heart. Yes. So we're still the same in that way. And we're just as different in our height. Neither of us have the same height, although some people might be the same height, but there's just as much chance. I mean, there's like frequency distributions, like I don't know, like 68% of the people are a certain range of heights, and like 12% are another range of heights. So they're all just as different and distributed the same. So effectively, you're asking how are the two how is person different than person? They're the same concept. You're in a way you're saying there is no difference. They're the same concept. Do you follow what I'm saying?
No, I didn't. I struggled to follow.
Well, I'm just saying that person is the same concept. In either sentence, they're the same concept. How does the concept person?
Okay. Are people more different than the same people?
Yeah.
Because the same as what? Different than what, right?
Yeah.
More different than the same people. Is that what you mean?
We're just talking about the concept person. How does the concept person, is the concept person more the same than different? Or is the concept person more different than the same?
Right. But it has to be compared to something. So you can only say more different than animals. I'm sorry, more different than a goat, more same than a, are they more different than a goat or more similar than
or less different than a goat?
Yeah.
More different than or less different than a goat. Yeah, you could say it that way. You can't compare the same thing. Are goats more the same than goats?
A goat's more different than goats are the same as goats. That's funny. All right, cool.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say.
But I thought about it because I was like, well, I was trying to apply what I've been learning about concepts because I remember saying that and I got stuck on that a while ago. And suddenly if you start thinking about clarity of concepts, it makes you even question the question, if you know what I'm saying. Whereas before you could easily go, oh, people are more the same than different because, we all want love or whatever the answer is. But then when you think about it, it's not, it's just, it doesn't mean anything. It's just feeling based.
Yeah, I think so. It's not a good question, but yeah.
Cool. But that's cool because then you identify what is and isn't a good question. So
yeah.
All right. I think we're ready to move on to Ito.
Sure.
In the time we have left. And
15 minutes.
We'll see where this goes. All right. So talking about measuring love, and she says that you can measure love. If you want to measure that, and I bolded the relevant part, if you want to measure a particular instance of love, one does so by reference to the hierarchy of values of the person experiencing it. A man may love a woman, yet may rate the neurotic satisfaction of sexual promiscuity higher than a value to him. But to me, I don't find it at all self-evident or obvious how you weigh those things. To me are completely different. So like, it's like, what do I love more? My work or my partner? Like, I don't even know how you would weigh different things. Okay, like you could say, I love my family more than a pencil. That's obvious because the pencil is replaceable, the family isn't. But I don't, like different kinds of people say you can experience different kinds of romantic love, right? And then some people will speak of love of one partner, then they say they had a completely different love for another, as if they're not even on the same continuum. So like, I'm not clear on how you weigh things that are in different categories in terms of like their value to you. It doesn't seem, what I'm saying is, it doesn't seem like every value will be on one continuum that is the same, and you just go by feeling like, oh, I feel way more about this value than that value. I don't know if you have thoughts.
I hate this question for this context, but say you asking like, how do you compare your love of, say, your job versus the love of your partner, say? Are you asking something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, they are different kinds of things that you're measuring.
Yeah, that's a better example because it's more difficult. But if you're talking about a pencil versus family, you're like, obviously. But then work versus a love, like, I don't know, then there's no like continuum where you introspect and you're like, oh, okay, my work is here on the continuum. Oh, my love is there.
Well, one thing is intensity. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, intensity of emotion. That would be one part of concepts of emotion that Rand even mentioned. Intensity is one part of that. What else could you use? Well, Rand said position on hierarchy of value. You could maybe estimate based on there's one hierarchy related to people, another hierarchy related to career interests, and you could see how they're relative to each other. Say the top of one hierarchy and the top of the other one. Like, are they both at the top of their respective hierarchies? Or is it like the bottom of the social hierarchy and the top of the career hierarchy?
But you couldn't compare them, right? Like you can say career is more important than relationships to me, for example, but you couldn't say this career is more important than this specific person, because they're like so the hierarchy itself, like the category of the hierarchy, like work, if it's the same level of abstraction, like you say work versus relationships, if it's general, but I don't see how you can go to the lower level of abstraction and go, okay, this job versus this person.
One difficult part of the question is, why is there necessarily even a choice between the two? Why can't they be both part of the same choice? I guess part of that would be context. Like, say you need to, if you have to move away for the job, but your partner isn't able to move for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That would be a dilemma. I guess you'd have to decide what's more important. It's just adding context to it so we can answer this more clearly.
Yeah, you're right.
Say you couldn't.
That's a good example.
Yeah, I mean, it does happen. So it's not realistic either. So how do you measure in that circumstance? Well, one, you would have to look at in terms of values. I mean, they might not be able to be attained at the same time, but can you pursue one for now and then later the other? Or can you continue pursuing this, wait a bit, then start pursuing the other? It doesn't have to be that they have to occur at the same time or in the expected ways. So one thing to do is see, do you even need to split them up? You don't even need to split them. It could just be a matter of what might be more important right now. Say right now you need emotional support, whatever the reason might be. So you say, yeah, I'll do this for now. And maybe in 3 years, I'll continue what I was doing the other path. It's not like you have to choose necessarily. It's just maybe you take a different path than you originally planned. That's one thing you could do. Maybe you can avoid the need to even make that distinction. Just, I don't know if you need to compare them always.
Right. Yeah, maybe you don't need to. Okay, I see what you're saying. That you can have these different values, and because even though there's no clean answer in the sense of how do you weigh all these values against each other, in reality, you'll often be able to go, okay, this category is important and so is this, but I don't have to give any of them up within each category. Like if you have 50 interests, you can still rank them.
Yes.
Not when I say interests, I don't mean incommensurate things like, let's say piano and a partner, but I mean, within the category of work or recreation or whatever, you've got things you can rank, but then you're saying in the overall categories, there's usually not some intense conflict where you're like, well, how do I weigh my partner against my work? That doesn't, you're saying you can, in reality, you can compromise between them.
If you're integrated on your values enough, hopefully you live your life in a way that your values are integrated with each other and don't inherently conflict. I think that's a big part of objectivism anyway, that you live your life according to principles, then your values won't conflict as much. Maybe it's not saying that maybe they never would, but if your values don't conflict as much, it means they're more integrated. There's less conflict. You're living a more deliberate life. That's one thing you could do. Just, you're right, those things might crop up if you made mistakes or you overlook something. Those conflicts may arise, but hopefully by you preventing in the first place. But if you do run into them, then yes, you might need to make these decisions. Like you might need to get down and dirty and figure out what's going to affect you the most right now, or
Right.
what is going to impact your life the most
Right.
in the grand scheme of things. You might not be able to compare them directly anymore. You might only be able to look at how do they impact your life and just say which impact is greater. Like, does moving away affect my life more, or does moving in with my partner affect me more in a positive way? That's what you have to look at, I think. Not comparing them directly, but the relationship they do have
Right.
is that they both affect your life. So that's the measurement you can use.
So they're both simultaneous, and there's no need to. It's always a case of within the general value hierarchy of the thing. So, like for example, work, career versus relationship. Within that category, there's always room to compromise and rearrange. But overall, in the broader scheme of like your different value hierarchies, they all simultaneous, which is what I think we touched on that. But
Yeah,
there's no need to
they
compare.
all impact your life.
Yeah.
So if you do need to compare, that's what you use. You say, well, how much do they impact my life? That's the one similarity your values will have, at least, if
Right.
nothing else.
Right. Okay. And would you say, so for me to say I want to compare, say, my job, so the specific job, to my partner, the specific partner, that would be like saying I want to compare a monkey to a not intentionally represent, but a monkey to a river.
Probably.
Okay.
Depending on the distinction between the two or how vivid they are. But yeah, that seems pretty big of a difference. It's like,
but then I can step back and go, I want to compare life, so monkey, to nature. And then suddenly you can't compare monkey to river, but you can compare life to nature. So that would be like comparing. So what my point was to create a parallel for when I was trying to find, all right, well, how do I compare my job to my partner? I'm like, no, you can't do that because it's like comparing a monkey to a river. What you need to do is you need to compare your value of work to the value that you have of relationships in general. So that would be the equivalent of comparing.
That could work.
That I'm just talking about like the level of abstraction. You need some,
yeah.
I don't know if it's commensurability, whatever you want to call it, but you need that. Otherwise you can't compare.
Yeah, I think you need a similar level of abstraction. Whether that's, say, how do you value these things in general life, or looking at how these two specific concrete things impact your life. Not that they compare them directly, but you could say what impact a career has in your life and what impact a long-term relationship can have. You might not be able to compare them directly, but you can compare them at least in terms of they impact your life.
Right.
And it's something you can use. Right. Not the only measurement, but a measurement.
Right. Okay. Let's see what this is. So it's about, I might skip this because I need to review this thing on CCDs. I'm lost on it right now. So I will just mark this so we can come back. Okay. Let's see what this is. I'm just quickly reading to remember what. Okay, I think I remember what I was thinking when I read this. It's like, how do you even, there's so many connections and like, it's so difficult to visualize it, which we did discuss ages ago. And so it's like, well, if it can't be, like, if it's so difficult to visualize it, how does the mind even comprehend it? And I think my answer to this now is that it's not that we hold, like if I clarify concepts. So this whole paragraph was about, what all the specific things that the concept marriage involves and property, and all the conceptual connections. And so I think my answer to this now is simply that it's not that you hold it in, you need to even visualize or hold it in a visual format, but that it's enough that your mind recalls the proper associations first to give you leads of where to take your thinking. And that's it. Mm-hmm. Would you say that would be a correct description?
Can you say that last sentence again?
Yeah. So, when you're clarifying concepts, you don't need literally to have in mind a visual hierarchy of like this thing's relationship to that. All you need are the relevant associations to be recalled. Like if I think about marriage, then, genus, differentia, and then my mind starts triggering all the relevant associations. That's basically all you need.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be literally visual, but it'll be organized in some way, of course. That's why I sent the Kvasnik article, just to show that these are different ways people organize concepts in
the explicit way.
These are the principles you could use or not use if they're not good. But yeah, it's that idea that they can be represented in this way. It's not about the visual as much as what's the connection between the terms.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, it's funny. I often have these questions that I don't think anyone else is asking because they're probably weird. Like, why does entity have to have multiple fundamentals? But they do keep coming up. I'm not really sure what the context is that causes them, if you want to call that. But I think this is one of them, because I'm like, okay, I get that. Well, at least I think I understand that if anything were immeasurable, it would bear no relationship to any kind of thing in the universe.
Yeah.
But then why am I still got stuck, and I was like, well, all right, you can have something that exists, but why can't it just not have a commensurable attribute to measure with something else? And I don't have this is all abstract talk, but I actually don't have an answer to this.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer. I would take like a couple paragraphs to answer it, I think.
Oh, really? Okay.
I have an answer, but it's not a quick one.
Yeah, okay. I will highlight that, so maybe we can revisit it. I'll highlight everything I need to revisit. Maybe we can see if there's one short one we can answer. Yeah. This is the same question. Why can't it? I feel like a lot of this is just these are questions that come from floating places. Because I don't have. It's so hard to have examples in mind.
Yeah.
And then it's like just playing on the words.
Yeah, I agree. That was like the last question. The previous one is very similar.
Yeah,
I think the answer involves the same thing.
Okay, I have a lot of those. I still, even after having people reply to me in this one, I still don't get it. I still don't have an answer to it. I think it's something to do with entity, which is why I asked you about is a finger an entity and all that. But there's something I'm doing where all these questions come up and I just say I don't get it.
Well, one thing that might help on this one is that Rand would say there is not that metaphysically one's more important than the other. It's not that like being red is more important than being square. Like neither is more important,
right?
Or even in a relationship like that, there's no essential that's more important than another. Epistemologically, yes, you're picking something else that explains the most or captures the most, but you're not saying that's without you, that apart from your awareness, that one thing is more important than another. I mean, reality has no care in the world of what's more important than the other. It's like not one doesn't like supersede the other. They all have, if there's a causal effect, it doesn't matter what else is there. It's just, that's what it does. It's not like a different cause takes over instead. You don't have like 5 causes and one cause is more important and takes over the other. They all happen at once.
But then, so metaphysically, is my rationality not as important, not more important than my finger, for example?
I mean, what is important if not a judgment or evaluation of
Right.
your mind?
Right.
It's only there by virtue of you making a judgment and evaluation.
Okay. Yeah. So important is like a measurement of the value significance. But
Yeah,
if we're just talking about something apart from a human, there's no such thing as important.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's just an epistemological term. It's an evaluative term. You only need to do it if you are making an evaluation of something.
But I still get confused and like, all right, cool. We're talking about an epistemological thing. I still get stuck on like, well, why must there be one thing that is important in an entity? Why can't there be 10 things that are all as equally important?
Yeah. Then that becomes the other question, the previous question. That's when it becomes that previous one.
That you can't measure. Why can't there be some commensurable attribute? So was that the question?
I think they're related questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely I don't know. I feel like it's because I'm floating on something, but